Hello everyone, how are you today? So, we finished the previous streams, previous couple of streams, maybe for the past 2-3 weeks. We did the small part, and we finalized in the last stream this building. And I've been telling you constantly that these are part of this project, which is like a scene from my city that represents one of the situations that's happening for the past couple of years, like maybe past decade. And this scene that I'm trying to tell a story about how private generators are across all, like all parts of the city, all corners, and they are between buildings, between rural areas. They are spreading pollutions, disease, just because the corruption is not allowing for the government to provide proper utility for the public. Anyways, but for today, since I'm running a bit on time, I'm running a bit short on time. I'm considering like doing a quick runoff of basic Blender stuff because many of you, well, I know it's not a lot. I have a few subscribers, but some of you have been asking me to do some sort of a beginner approach to this. So instead of me just going through and doing all of this super quickly, I want to just do a quick maybe 10-15 minutes show you how this software works if you want to know more about it. It is endless in capability. I don't have a bullet points. This is not scripted. I just want to I'm also not an expert. Like in every stream I try to tell you that I don't really know what I'm doing. I'm just learning along, so we're trying to discover stuff, but I do stuff constantly. I've been doing this 3D stuff for the past 15 years, not in Blender for the past maybe 6 months. So I know my way around, but I'm not like the one that can tell you like exactly specifically how it's the best way to do things. I'm just streaming what I'm learning in public. Okay. So first let's go to preferences and do bigger. Okay. So I'm just enlarging the UI, but because I have a high resolution screen, but it's small size, so everything looks very small. All right, so okay, so we are like the next couple of streams. This playlist is gonna be about making generators, and these are the generators that you see around here. Like these are not clean. Like this, these are the generators that I'm talking about. These are what am I showing in the scenes. They're usually like generators with some sort of an exhaust and like a diesel tank that's fueling them, and then you have like the pipes going through, and then of course you have all the electrical wires going everywhere. So when you see a lot of electrical wires, it's usually coming from these guys, and with the poles and everything. And of course the exhausts are just spreading all the pollution. They have like these kind of doors. This is actually not generator, this is the cover of it. And if you open it, you're gonna see something that looks more like a generator. This is a cleaner reference image. This is another place, another corner of the neighborhood. Then you can see like these kind of details where they push the exhaust up, and this is the deflector for the smoke for it to come back down. I don't know, like maybe this is just to avoid the smell going into the buildings, neighboring them. It doesn't do anything. More reference images. This is just a truck fueling a different type. So you have different shapes and types, and like you can see some of them have like this kind of small thing. Some of them are more squarish or rectangular or cubic. I don't know however you wanna call it. So these are my reference images, but this is the series we're gonna be working on soon. But for today, just let me show you around Blender a little bit. So when you start Blender, you usually if I press new, I gotta save. Usually start with the cube, and you see everybody pressing X and deleting it. So X is to delete, but before going into that, this is what we call a scene. So all of this is what we call a scene. It starts by default. You can delete it, of course. It starts by a camera, by a light, and by a 3D object, and it exists in a 3D context, which is the red axis you see in here is the X-axis. It's the same thing you see in here. and which is technically right or left if you want, and then you have the y-axis, which is the green, and the blue axis is the z. And to turn around this, you have to press the middle mouse button. I'm gonna go through this very quickly. I know most of you will know these, or like there are more specific tutorials for all of these. The same thing you see here in the scene collection. So this is the scene, which you see in here in the outliner. And they exist in a collection, which is basically a way for Blender to group things. So you can create collections by pressing M, and then you can create a new collection that's, you can call this 3D models. And now you move the cube from this collection, the default collection that comes in the new file, into the cube, into the 3D models collections. Okay, so there are lots of things to learn about Blender. I'm not gonna go through all of them. I'm just gonna like quickly through the viewport first. So middle mouse to turn, scrolling to zoom in and out, and control and middle mouse you can also zoom in and out. If you have like a pen, you could do it. You can do some different keying. And if you press Alt while rotating, you're gonna snap into different corners of the viewport, like top view, or front view, or like bottom view. And you can see in here, you can also press on these axes to snap into the -x, -y. Depends on where you're looking at. You can also press the num locks 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. The 7 is the top view, 1 is the front, 2 is an orthographic, 3 is the right. If you press Ctrl 3, you're gonna go to the left. If you press Ctrl 7, you're gonna go to the bottom. So you play around a bit with the num lock buttons, the keypad, and you'll get different point of views. You can also press on this button, which is number 5, and this will change your view from perspective into orthographic. And the difference between perspective is that with perspective, you have the parallel lines converging into one vanishing point on the view level. So the view level is somewhere here, or maybe somewhere here, and these two lines are connecting into it, and these two lines are going, I think these should go somewhere, like they should go all into the same point eventually. The view line is further. And if you press 5, everything becomes, the parallel lines stay parallel, they don't converge into anything. So this is not gonna meet at any point further. So the front, the left, and the top and the bottom views are actually orthographic views, by the way. So the thing that I've been doing here, this is called annotation. If you press D, you can write anywhere you want, and if you press D and right click, you can delete. So D, I can write just annotations. D and right click, I can erase. Okay, and this is the toolbar, whatever you see in here, and this change depending on the context. So we are currently in what we call object mode. So what we see in here are just objects, but we can shift into different modes in Blender. We can go to edit, where we can edit the object that we are selecting, and this change according to the object we're selecting. So if I go into the camera, there is nothing here. Like you cannot edit the vertices of the cameras. It's just a point of view. If you go to the light, there's also nothing in here. So this, you have edit mode mostly for the 3D objects, and you have like for different stuff, you have different, like for the 3D objects, you have sculpt mode, vertex paint, weight paint, texture paint. I'm not gonna go through all of these, of course, but for something like a spline, which is a curve, I'm gonna show you this later, how to access this panel. You can see there is only edit mode. You cannot paint texture, you cannot weight vertices. It's something different. Okay. All right. Now, of course, in Blender, I usually try to learn the shortcuts and try to practice them as much as possible, because it makes a huge difference. You become much faster and you can be more efficient. So if you press letter T, you're gonna open the toolbar here, and this toolbar changes according to what you're selecting. So if I'm not selecting anything, I think it's Alt A to deselect everything. I'm still selecting the cube. Okay. So for some reason it is refusing to go out smooth. Anyway, select, none. For some reason it's sticking to the cube. Okay, so let's say we're in the cube now. If you go to edit mode, you see if you click and drag here, you see the names of each tools. Most of the time the box cutter is an add-on. It's really powerful. But most of the time you have shortcuts for all of these. You're not gonna probably press on most of them, and you should learn the shortcuts. They, like I said, they make your life easier. And what edit mode does, it lets you access either the vertices, so each point, and then you can move them. I'll show you how. The edges, so now you can pick the edges only, or the faces. Alright, I'm not gonna go too much into like what to do, because I have streams that I'm doing these actually like in real time, and like you can learn much more than me just telling you like press this button and press this button. It's not gonna be very efficient, but for the time being, like you can do stuff like insetting the face, extruding the face, extruding this face. You can merge points by selecting them and pressing merge at the center. I'm gonna show you some of these now, but like edit mode, this is the possibility of edit mode. And if you press Ctrl Tab, it's the same as going here and pressing this. So Ctrl Tab, you can select object mode, you can select edit mode. You just have to press Ctrl Tab and just hover. You don't even need to click, just hover your mouse over whatever mode you need to be in. And when you are in sculpt mode, you can press G for the grab. For example, these are different brushes. If you have a CNC brush, F to enlarge the brush, Shift F to change the strength, so F to change the radius of the brushes, strength is to change the strength of the brushes, so Shift F and F, and like you can change these here. Like I'm grabbing the vertices as if I'm sculpting them. And I think the wireframe is somewhere. Check. Yeah, so if you press here, you have something called viewport overlays, and here you can turn on the wireframes for the viewport. Shift is to smooth everything, so I smooth the whole thing and it's collapsing on itself. Again, I'm not gonna go too deep, just like a 10 minutes. We've already been like through half of it. Okay, so you have different modes for the objects, and these modes are different according to the type of object you're selecting, whether it's a 3D model or a camera or a light or a spline or whatever. Pressing Shift A, it's the same thing as pressing object, and I think it's gonna be it's gonna be the same as add, sorry. So Shift A is the same as add, not as object. And then you can here pick if you want to do a mesh, a cube, a circle, whatever. Like this is a cube. Here, let me show you. This is a cube. This is a UV sphere. A circle is more like a 2D circle, but this is a mesh, not a curve, not a spline. If you press tab, you go to one, you can see it has vertices. So this is made of small segments. Whereas if you go to Shift A, I pressed Ctrl Tab to hover between different sculpt mode, between the edit mode and the object mode. You can also just press Tab if you want, especially between edit mode and object mode. So when I'm in object mode, if I press Shift A, I can select the curve, and the curve here, if you go to tab, is different. It's made out of control points and handles. It's not made out of like this, of small vertices. So here, as you can see, it's completely different. Right? There's a lot to dive into. I'm gonna go all of that now. If you select everything, press X, delete, you're gonna delete it. If you press N, you're gonna activate or show like this side toolbar, and the tools is actually the tool that I'm selecting. So the move tool, this is the move tool. You can change a bit of its settings. Remember, like this is the active tool, and then you have the workspace and the object scatter. Forgot about them. I never actually used them for now. You have the view. You can change the camera view. So let's say we have a cube in here. If you press period on the numpad, you're gonna be focusing on this. And then let me go back to object select, and then you can change the viewport point focal length. So you can go something wide like 18mm lens, or you can go something more narrow like a 200mm lens, let's say. It starts to look more like a orthographic, even though this is not orthographic. It's still converging and it's still gonna meet somewhere, but it's gonna be very far away. The distance between the point of view and the object is gonna be pushed further. I think something like 60 is fine for now. I'm not sure. I think that 50 is the default anyway. There are different things we can go through. The rest is mostly plugins, add-ons. But for now, let me see, there's an annotation somewhere. It's in the view, I think. So in the view, this is the annotation. So when I press D and write, I'm actually writing on this layer. I can delete it. When I press D and write again, it creates a new layer by itself. And you can actually change the color of this. Alright, so the type of objects that you can create in Blender are a mesh, which is made out of vertices, edges, and faces. A curve, as you saw, it's made out of control points. Surfaces are more like NURBS. It's similar to curves. It's a different approach to do it. I gotta admit, I don't really know about it, and I think Blender isn't the best at it as well. Like NURBS in something like Maya or 3ds Max are very strong tools. I haven't heard good news about the surfaces in Blender. I should look into it more. It's a different approach. So when we model here, you kind of model by moving faces, extruding faces, whereas in NURBS you kind of model by creating curves and then connecting these curves, lofting between them to shape the object. Okay, so next there are something called meta balls, and I think I haven't really used them before, but I think if you duplicate them, they kind of mutate into each other, and they usually use these for snow. And the shortcut for duplicating something is Shift D. So when you press Shift D, you're creating a new copy of this. So this is how you duplicate objects. And when you do a command, you usually have like this small menu or toolbar that has a bit more options about what you want to do. So here you see you have 3 balls, and they kind of go into like one object data that has all of these 3 balls together. Okay, again, we can create text. Volume is something like fog or like something like this, smoke. Grease pencil is something very, very, very important. I like to use it a lot. It's like if you go into a new, let's say 2D animation, and this is grease pencil, it's technically drawing 2D in a 3D context. There's a way to set it up in a normal Blender file. You don't have to go create a new 2D animation. You can just create grease pencil blank, and if you go to one of its mode, there's a draw mode. So here there's something called the draw mode, and now you can draw, but it depends where you want to draw. So now it's drawing in the origin. You can say I want to draw on surfaces, and you can draw on other 3D surfaces. You see the offset is too big, you can say I want to have a smaller offset when I'm drawing. And you want to draw from the view, or you want to draw always from the front. So I don't think it matters when you have surfaces. So it's another tool that you can use. And let's create a mesh cube. Of course, you can create an armature, which is the way to rig stuff, and rigging means like adding controls to animate them, like the bones of the whatever you wanna control. Lattices are more like empties that have some functionalities, and of course you can add lights and cameras and stuff like this. Okay. So we have the toolbar menu. You press T, you get it. You have the end menu, the side menu. You have different modes for each object. Of course, these are different contexts for each mode. So this is a modeling context. just a way for Blender, like they have set up the workflow, the viewport for us to be specific for, let's say, modeling or sculpting or editing or UV editing, texture painting, and whatever. These are just different ways to view whatever you see in here. And you can actually customize stuff by yourself. So if you go to the corner, you usually see like this small cursor. I don't think you can see it here on my screen. Let me see, maybe here. So if you see my mouse right here on the bottom, okay, just a second. So you can click and drag, and it creates new viewports, and each viewport, if you click here on this icon, you can say I want this as a 3D viewport, I want it as an image editor. So 3D viewport is the 3D. Image editor is the way for you to edit images. Geometry nodes, you can do stuff with geometry, like with math, to create some procedural 3D stuff. Shader editor to work with the material and stuff like this. And if you click and drag, you can cancel the other viewport. And if you press Ctrl space in one of the viewport, you kind of expand it. So any viewport, you can press Ctrl space on it, you make it full screen, so you can check it out more, or you can like have a full screen, and you can either back to previous or Ctrl space. So this is just a quick rundown. Of course, you have here what the properties, I don't know, like the properties tab, and it has, this is the same thing as the tool in here. If you let me show you more about the tool. So let's say I'm in sculpt mode, press T, press G for the grab, and press F to make it bigger. So this is, let me hide this. So to hide this. So this is more like how big the radius is, how strong the brush is, and like you can add textures to the brush, make different strokes. This is the tool, and then the render is which render engine you want to use, and the settings of the render engine. The scene properties, like what's the viewport like, what aspect ratio. For the animation, what are the frame ranges, when it's gonna stop, where are you outputting your renders, the view layers, something different. This is more related to the scene properties in relation to simulations and units, like you can make it in millimeters, you can make it in inches, like imperial or metric, and you can change the unit scale. So you're saying 1 is equal to 1 meter, rotations are degrees, you can do different stuff. Okay, the world is the whole 3D world that we are in, so you can say the color here is gray, or you want it something else, but then you have to make it different here. Let's see. This has to come from, okay, this usually is seen in the renderings. So this is the word, the context, but this is usually a render, in the context of the render. So what I haven't showed you yet is the way you can viewport. You can view your viewport. So here our viewport is set to viewport shading. Then you can set it to just preview the materials, or you can set it to render, which is real-time rendering in the scene. And you have different settings for each. So for each of them you have different settings, or you can press Z and you can jump between the different modes. Okay. Anyways, here are more like you can do more properties for the collection. So you can say I want to disable this collection and render, I don't want to make it selectable. Okay, you can add line art, you can do stuff like this. You don't need to do more. So this is more related on the object itself. So this is the object data. So this is the location of the cube, the rotation of the cube, the scale of the cube. It's the same thing as these in the N menu. You can also say how do you want to see it in the viewport. So let's say you want to see it in like in different colors just for the viewport. This is not material. You can say I want to see it as wires only, while other things can be shown as 3D. These are a bit advanced ways to like visualize your scene, especially if you're working in teams. And then you have the modifiers. The modifiers is a big topic, but you can add stuff that are non-destructive. So you can say I wanna, let's say, something. So let's say I wanna mirror this on the Y, and it's mirroring on the pivot point of the object, the origin of the object. And when I right click on the object, I did set the origin to follow the 3D cursor, and this is the 3D cursor. The 3D cursor is a whole subject by itself. The origin is a subject by itself. The modifiers are subjects by itself. So this is just, I think I'm gonna stop right now. Like we have been doing this for maybe 20 minutes. This is just like a very, very quick introduction into how the thing works. So if you just dig your way around, watch tutorials quickly, small short tutorials, you can learn a lot. But this is basically the things that you need just like to start to like not to get scared when you start opening Blender. So if I go back to my generators project, so I'm still gonna do this. I'm gonna explain what I'm doing in a basic level when I'm working on these. Probably today I'm not gonna do much because I still have maybe like 20 minutes. But in the next streams, I'm gonna be doing this a bit slowly, knowing that this is like an easier object to do than the building, like when we did all of this. So I can take a bit more time and I can explain things a bit better. Right. So again, I'm not sure if there is a, let me see, add-ons, sign shape keys. Which one? There's an add-on, I'm not sure if it comes with Blender, that shows the keys I'm pressing. So add-on in Blender, show press keys or buttons. It's called screencast keys. So let's look for it. Screencast. So it's not part of the. So this is an add-on called screencast key. It's no longer distributed with the official release due to some limitation, but you can install it yourself if you want. Download it and click in the file. Right. So I can do this off stream. So it's it no longer comes with Blender. I'm on Blender 4. Actually, it has been discontinued since 2015. So yeah. Anyways, let's move this guy a bit. Okay. So I'm gonna start working on this. So if I press the backsplash button like this, I don't know, this is the back of or the front splash. Let me check. Splash. Doesn't, what's the difference between backsplash versus doesn't want to show. Okay, anyways, so it's the one next to the shift button. If you like, I have my wireframe here. I have it, I right click and I added it to the okay, so the queue is called quick favorites menu, and you can technically add a lot of tools to it instead of like me going here and then pressing wireframe every time I want to turn on wireframes, or go there and I'm pressing or turning it off. I added the wireframe into the queue or the quick favorite menus, and the way to do that is to right click, and you have to right click on this one. And here it says remove because it's already added. If it's not added, you can see add for quick favorite menus. So queue for the wireframes, and you can see like this is just the shape of the generator. It's not like how these generators look like. So let's pick one of them and let's start working on it. I think I want to start with this one. And you know, instead of doing it with this model, I think I'm gonna start a new file. I'm not gonna save this. I'm gonna drag the side of my viewport here just to create a new viewport. I'm gonna go here to something called image editor. I'm gonna create a new image, or I'm gonna open an image, sorry. It's on my desktop. It's generators. And it's this one. So here I have now a reference image. Let me keep my OBS open so I can see what I'm doing. So here now I have a reference image. And I can start with the cube. What I usually do is select the camera and the light. I can press X and delete them. I can press T to hide the toolbars. I don't need it. And I think we can start. Okay. So the size of this cube is 2 meters by 2 meters by 2 meters. I'm working to scale actually in this project. So I think 2 meters from here to here is maybe a bit big for this generator. It could be a bit high. So let's say on the Z axis this is around 1.8 or maybe less, maybe 1.7. And like this, that could be around 2.5 meters. For now, we can always change it. So this is the Y, 5 probably. And on the X, which is the width for now, it seems like 1.5 meters for me. So that's just a quick way to do it. Then I'm gonna pick all of these, press G to move. Okay, Alt Z, we turn something called in edit mode, called the X-ray view, which is this button. It's the same thing if you press Alt Z, which is faster. Because if you don't have this kind of ghost mode, if I clicked here, even though there's a vertex in here, it's not gonna be selected. This one. But if I press Alt Z, then it's gonna be selected, okay? So when I'm like this, I'm also selecting the back vertices. I'm gonna press G, or all of vertices, I'm gonna press G, Z, so I can constrain it or like lock it into the Z axis. So I'm just moving up, press 1. Actually, now what's the height? It's 1.7, so what's the... Can we do something like this? G, Z, 1.7 divided by 2. 1.7 divided by 2. 7. Okay. So let's try again. G, Z, 1.7 divided by 2. Didn't work. You usually can do this stuff. So here on the location, 1.7 divided by 2. So you can see it moved directly. It just didn't work when in the edit mode. Then if you press Ctrl A or you press object, you're gonna apply the location. So now you can see that this object has moved by 85 centimeters. If I press Ctrl A, it's the same thing as pressing object. So Ctrl A, and I'm gonna apply the location, and now the location here is zeroed out. And the center of this object is still the center of the world. If I press now tab, now I wanna construct whatever is happening in here. So I'm gonna pick a face, I'm gonna extrude that face. You know what, first, just let's make sure that the proportions are fine. I think they are fine. They are fine. So let's move forward. So if you press E, we're extruding. Now it's about the thickness of that door. I think it's around 4 centimeters, so 0.04. Or maybe more, so let's add maybe 2 centimeters to this. So I can press G to move, Y to lock it on the Y axis, and maybe 0.02 or minus 0.02. So again, G, Y, minus 0.02. So now I have this panel, this one, and now I can press, I can actually separate it because this is a separate object than this. I can press one face, then Alt click on the edge that I want to loop around, Then press shift and select the other face. So now we have all of this selected. You can press, or you can do select this face and press Ctrl plus, numpad plus, the numpad's the one on the right, and like this expanded the selection, and minus it reduces the selection. It's expanding the selection, so I'm selecting more. And if I press P, it says separate. I think it should be somewhere here also as well. Maybe it's in the mesh. It should be somewhere here. Again, yeah, it's here. So you can separate, if you press mesh, you can separate by selection, material, or by loose parts. So it's the same thing as pressing P, and you can say separate by selection, material, or loose parts. So loose parts means if you have different objects combined into one object, if you press P, separate by loose parts, you're gonna separate them each by individually. So now I'm gonna press P, I'm gonna separate the selection, go to object mode, and now I have two separate objects. If I press on the backsplash or the forward slash, I'm not sure, then tab, then if you click alt click on the edges and press F, you're gonna fill this face, and I can move this on the Y by maybe like half a centimeter on the minus, so minus 0.05 or not 0.005, and you can go into this object, backsplash, tab, and the same thing, alt click on the edges, F to fill it. Okay, so now we have two closed edges. Click on the backsplash again to unhide all. I'm gonna press Q like I showed you, and in the quick favorite menu you can click here and you can see the wireframe again. So the wireframes helps me a bit in seeing the edges, especially when it is this kind of white, like still at early on. I think we need to scale, so I'm gonna pick this, press shift, click the other. I'm gonna scale on the X by a little bit. It seems a bit wide for now. But what happened right now, if you press N, you can see that the scale is not, it's not like applied, or it's not like one everywhere. And this kind of scale is not very good when you're applying modifiers, because modifiers actually are multiplied by scales, or like everything you do is actually multiplied by the scale of the object. So it's a very good habit for us to press always Ctrl A and apply the scale, and now the scale is applied. It didn't affect the dimensions, they're still the same. It's just that the scale now, if we add some modifiers, it's not gonna be used against like whatever like sometimes if you're doing things and like it's not behaving the way you want them, usually it's a scale issue. You need to apply the scale. So I have this object right now. If I press Ctrl R, and I have to go to edit mode or tab, Ctrl R. Ctrl R is the same thing as adding a loop cut here. There are different ways to add loop cuts. Shift Ctrl R. So what's the shift Ctrl R? It's the way to slide them. Ah, cool. I haven't used this before. You can always learn something new with Blender. So again, so Ctrl R, I'm gonna create, you know what, I'm gonna create two. So Ctrl R, and when you scroll with the mouse wheel, you can add more cuts or less cuts. So 2 cuts are perfect. Try to click to get out of this, and we are kind of like even in here. So we have 3 equal parts, which is the same thing as here. So we have 3 equal parts, and then we're gonna add maybe 3. But what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna pick this one. I'm gonna Control X instead of X. X is deleting. Let's say if I wanna delete the edge, it's gonna delete the face with it. Instead, if you do X and dissolve the edges, it's just gonna dissolve the edges without deleting the faces. It's gonna dissolve the edges and the vertices that are aligned with it. This is the same thing as pressing Control X. So Control X is the same thing as dissolve. Alright, we're gonna pick this guy. Let me first remove these. Let's check if there's a certain detail here or it's just casted all together. Yeah, they are casted all together. Alright, so we're gonna extrude by something. Just this is around 45 centimeters. I think let's do it around 50 centimeters maybe. Yeah. Now what we need to do is create this frame, which is basically an inset by maybe 6 centimeters. So inset is pressing I. Let me do it again. So I press I, and now I can insert this object. It's probably, you can see in here, if you focus in here, so you can see it says thickness. You can see how much you're doing it visually. So this is around 10 centimeters, and this is around 3 centimeters, I guess. If you press shift, you can make it more accurate by decimal points. And I'm probably gonna say 5 centimeters for this one, or maybe 4. So 4 centimeters is fair. Alright, so this is not attached to this. So this looks something like this. It's like a fin that's not welded to the structure of the generator. It's probably bolted from the inside. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna extrude this inwards. How many of these do we have? We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So we have 8. Okay, so we can do it in a different ways. One of the easiest ways to do it, I guess, is just to do like just take a box and just extrude it. Okay, so let me save this first. Generator 1. Save this. So if you create a new cube, it's gonna be created in the center of the world on the 3D cursor. If you press G, you're gonna move it. You can scale it by pressing S. G, you can move it. Alt, you can go to tab to go to edit mode. You can press Alt Z to go to this X-ray mode that I talked about previously. And then if you press 1, 1, 2, 3, so 1, 2, 3 is moving between the vertices, the edges, and the faces. So 1 is for the vertices, 2 are for the edges, and 3 are for the faces. And I just wanna recreate the shape here, which in profile should look something like this, which is simple. So I'm gonna grab these faces, press G on the Z axis and move them down. Then I'm gonna select the faces and pick all of these faces. Press Alt Z, so these are the faces I'm selecting. Press X and delete them. Then let's apply the scale, and because, let me show you, if I add something called the solidify modifier, if I press on the modifiers and apply the solidify modifier, and I say, let's say, offset it by maybe like half a meter, and for it, this is a half a meter when the scale is minus 0.003. Whereas if you apply the scale, you can see that this is now we have a half a meter, which is more accurate. This is actually half a meter in this context. So it was multiplying this half a meter by minus 0.003, and this was messing it up. Alright, so maybe this is like maybe 1 centimeter, maybe less. Let's go for something less. Like these panels are usually in the millimeters, so maybe 0.002 millimeters. But if you notice something, if you expand this out, you see that this is not, it's kind of offsetting. So what you do is you click on the even thickness, and this is more what we want. Maybe sometimes you do want this behavior, maybe sometimes you want this, so it's up to you. And like I said, it's gonna be something like 0.00 millimeters metal. That's enough. And we can move. So this small orange dot is the origin of this object. So this is where, if I want to scale, I'm scaling from this point. If I want to rotate, I'm rotating from this point, and you can see like this small line indicating this. You can move this. You can right click, set the origin to geometry, so it moves to the center of the bounding box of the geometry. So if you have like a bounding box, imaginary bounding box around the whole of this, something like this. It's somewhere in here, maybe like it's a different way of calculating it depending on different axes, but you can move this into wherever you want by, there are different ways. One of the ways that I use, you can actually move it, I think by pressing Control period or pressing period while moving it. It's something like this. Okay, forget about it. The way I do it usually is I pick where I want to move it. I want it to be in the center of this edge. These edges do not exist actually. I was trying to select them. These are created by the Solidify modifier. They don't really exist, so this is something that we should also be aware of. Press Shift S and this opens like a menu for us to control the cursor. The cursor is this thing. It's very important in Blender. You can use it to do different things. So press Shift S and you can say I want the cursor to come to the selected, and you can see here that the cursor is at the selected now. And then press tab to get out of edit mode and press right click and set the origin to 3D cursor. And now the origin has moved here. And then you can do Shift S and you can say the cursor, you can move it back to the word origin. So Shift S, cursor toward origin. You can keep it here, but that's up to you. So what this allows us to do now is just to scale on the X. Like this. And press Alt Z to see everything in X-ray. Press G, move this somewhere here. Then let's Control A, apply the scale. Just like we said, we don't want scale that is messed up. You can press tab again, Alt Z again, 1 for the vertices, and move this down a bit. Actually, what you can do also, if you want to see what you're doing from different perspectives, you can create a new window, 3D viewport window. So here you can look at things from, let's say, from front view. Let's press N and T. So now I'm looking at this generator from the front view, but here I'm looking at it from the side view. So G, move it on the Z, Alt Z, and this is my first pen. So instead of me pressing Shift D, then pressing Z and duplicating it, then pressing Shift D, pressing Z and duplicating it, that's not the best way to do it. The best way to do this is actually to add a new modifier called an array modifier, and it's offsetting now on the X, so it's duplicating the object on the X. I want to tell it to duplicate it on the Z, actually to duplicate on the minus Z to go down, and let's reduce the count to something like 8. So like I said, these are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So these are 8, but this is a bit higher, and you can change the offset into something like minus 1.01, and you can drag this to make it whatever offset you want. So needs to be probably minus 1.2 or maybe minus 1.19. And this is relative. You can do it constant. You can say I want it by like a certain offset. You can say like maybe by 20 centimeters, 10 centimeters, whatever. It's up to you. And you can do like relative on the Z but constant on the Y, or whatever. Like you can do whatever you want. So this is this. There seems to be like a texture pattern in here. What I'm gonna do is, I like to add these small details even though this is more of a texture thing. I'm gonna go to tab mode, Control R, and then I'm gonna show you how to do a bevel. It's called the bevel, which is this. We don't need this anymore. Let's just take it away. So if you press Control B and you slide left to right, you're beveling this edge into two edges. And the bevel has different uses. It can be used also on corners. So if I have these edges selected, and I press Ctrl B in here. Let's check first if the scale is set. It is. So you can see here, this is what the bevel does. It creates like a beveled edges. And if you slide the mouse, you can create more segments or less. Also, bevel is something that has much more uses. So if you look in here, there are different stuff that you can do with the bevel tool. But for now, if you use it on just a flat edge like this, not on a corner edge, it will just create more edges out of it. They are equally separated. So let's say something like this. I'm just looking at that right now. And let's move it G on the Z. And I'm gonna okay, I think I'm gonna also add an edge in here, bevel it like this, something like this, and I'm gonna extrude this just by a little bit. Okay. The next, what's the next? We have to look around because this is not a very good image. All right, so we have the hinges. The hinges are like welded metal pieces. You can see here, there's a bevel, by the way. There's a beveled edge in here. Let me press D. These edges are beveled, but they are barely seen. But if you add these small details, it actually adds to the realism of all of this. So let's add the hinges, these two small metal. So I think what's happening in here is like, this is like a small plate that's connected to a cylinder here, and then you have the same thing happening with the door, right? So what we can do is we can press 7 to go to the top view. We can press tab to go into edit mode, and press 1 to go to vertices. Or instead of vertices, what we can do is we can pick this edge, since we wanna create our cylinder somewhere here. We can press Shift S and move our cursor to selected. Then press tab, press Shift A, and then pick a cylinder. So now we have a cylinder. If you scale it, it is technically right where we created it, where we added the cursor. So it is located properly. Let's scale it a bit down. Okay, and then we can Ctrl A, apply the scale. We can make it bigger on the Z axis in terms of dimension, not scale. But again, Blender usually prefers higher scale objects, so it's a bit hard to work with when you're working with centimeters. Right, so we move this on the X by pressing GX, and you move it outwards like this. So what we want to do is also create this box, the same thing. So we can either try to extrude it out of the cylinder, which I think can be done. It's a bit hard, but can be done. So if you press Tab, Alt Z, Ctrl R, and just keep it in the middle, bevel, just so we can have some faces in here. Go to the top view, Alt Z. I think we need this face here, if we can pick it, or these two faces here. Yeah. So we don't need these. If you press Ctrl, we can deselect them. 7 to go back to the top view. We can extrude like this. And these have a certain curve in them, but we want to make them flat, so we want to scale them to 0. So what we do is, and this is the y-axis, since this is the y-axis, this is the y-axis. So we scale on the y and we press 0. And now if you look at from top view, you can see it flattened. Move it on the y back and extrude it a bit like this again. So now we can extrude this to the side. I should have looked what I'm doing, but that's okay. I can rotate on the Z by 90 degrees. And then I can Control A and apply the rotation because we don't want any information in here that is changed. Okay, so now we can press tab again, we can press 1 for the vertices, Alt Z to go to X-ray mode, which is the same thing as here. So now this is because we can now select the back and the front faces. And let's just play a bit with the scale of things because it looks a bit different. It looks small actually, so let's just make it bigger. So move this to the on the Y a bit like this, move it on the Z a bit upwards, and actually it should be more like this, and move the whole thing up. So this is the first hinge, and actually we can use backsplash to isolate everything but this face, and I think we should make this a bit thicker on the X. So when I decide which axis I want, I usually look at this little gizmo in here which defines which axis I wanna move things around. Okay, so again G on the X. Doesn't have to be completely attached. This will create some interesting shadows actually. And maybe we can pick these two edges and scale them on the Z just to have this small chamfer in here, and this is this is fine, it's not gonna show. So this is this. Now that we finished all of this, we can press tab, pick the edges that we wanna bevel. So let's do this in this mode. So I'm just picking the edges that I want to introduce a small bevel to. So all of these, and I'm gonna press, yeah, all of this. I'm gonna press Control B and just press what numbers we want to bevel by. I think we should bevel it by, you can add a small, you can use the scroll mouse, you can scroll the wheel actually to add more vertices. But we don't need much here. It's gonna be something small, maybe 0.01. It's too big. 0.005. Yeah. So that's half a centimeter. And you have this like context menu that you can use after you use your tool, just if you want to change something later. So 0.005. Alright. So this is fine. Let's do also these 1, 2, 3. I think we can ring these edges. No, okay. So shift select the edges you want to select and just do the same thing, Control B, 0.005. And I don't really care about these like this topology, like a face of 5 vertices. Usually they tell you to make everything in quads or in triangles. I don't really care about this. For the purpose of my project, it doesn't really matter for me. Alright. And again, what we can do is we can take this object and we can add a mirror modifier. So back on the modifiers, search for mirror, and it should be mirrored on the Z-axis, not the X-axis, and we want to use this object as the center point for us. But what we want to do is we want to right click on this one and set the origin to geometry. So now the origin of this object is centered to it, and these are mirrored according to whatever the center of this object is. So this is part 1. Let's move on to this panel in here. So this is one panel and it has a door inside of it and has something like welded 2 metal tubes on it with metal planes, which I think these are easy to create. So let's start. So this is we need to cut something here because this is different. So this, you have a different part of it in the back. So what we are gonna do is press tab, Ctrl R to create a loop cut and move it somewhere here, I think. Yeah. And then what we can do is we can go 3, pick this face, Ctrl plus P, separate the selection. And if you want to jump between different, actually we're still here, so that's fine. But what I'm trying to say is, if you, let's say you're in edit mode in this object, but you want to jump to this object, what you do is press Alt Q while hovering on a different object, and then you can just move while in the same mode without like having to go out, selecting this, then going back in. All right, so for this, what we want to do is we want to click all of the edges here. The edges, not the faces. Alt Shift, press F to fill it, backsplash again, then Alt Q, backsplash, Alt F. Let's move this face a bit on the Y, like this. We move by pressing G, or you can pick these tools, but of course, since you're using Blender, make sure that you learn the shortcuts, because it makes your life much easier. All right, now what do we want to do? We want to go to edit mode. Let's keep on this selection. On the edges, Ctrl R, and just move the mouse, like scroll the wheel, and you have these two edges. Right click or escape just to get out of it, and now we have 2 loop cuts. We can scale on the Y to slide them away from each other if you want. Just visually, we're creating a place for the door actually here. I think this is fine. The same thing for the horizontal, for the vertical. So apply it, scale on the Z, something like this. We're just doing this visually. Then what we can do is go 3, select this face, press P, let's separate it. Okay, and then let's scale it by, first let's right click, set the origin to geometry. So now we're scaling from the center, and see and scale it maybe by like I don't know, 2%, so we 0.98, so we're removing the 2%. And Ctrl A, apply the scale for this one, and maybe just add a solidify for it, just to give it some thickness. It could be something like 5 millimeters. You know what, it's too little, let's do something like 2 centimeters. Probably it's gonna have some frames and some structures, so it's not gonna be like a few millimeters, it's gonna be something maybe like 4 centimeters. Anyway, so back to this. We now have a door in here. Okay, I think we need to add a this thing in here. So what we do is we go back to tab, Ctrl R, add something like this here. And what we can do actually, let me show you this. It's one of the tricks to do precision. You can slide all the way down, so it's on top of the border edges. Then you can press G on the Z, let's say by 4 centimeters. So now you have exactly like a 4 centimeter face here. And then you can pick these faces in here, press 3, pick the faces in here, then extrude by something like also under 4 centimeters. And on the top here you can see that you have around maybe like 4 or 5, like 6 centimeters where you have something else. Let me see. This is also hollow, so we can also delete these guys here. So X, delete the faces. Yeah, that's fine. That's gonna be dark in shadows, so I'm not really worried about like adding like thicknesses to these stuff. So next, let's add the loop cut in here. Let's add the loop cut in here. Let's pick these 2 loop cuts by pressing Shift Alt, then pressing S, on the Y, just so for them to be equal. Something like this, I guess. Yeah, probably a bit big, so let's do scale again on the Y. Let's add the loop cut, slide it all the way up, then press G, Z, and move it down by minus 0.04. And now we can select these faces and extrude them by also 4 centimeters. And now we can either add these as separate objects, which they are actually, or we can model them as part of the generator, which could be easier actually to do. So let's do this. So let's add a loop cut here. Yep, Control R to add a loop cut. Pick these faces, extrude them by something, just visual. Now, in terms of clean model, we now have 2 faces here and inside of here that are overlapping. You can clean that up, that's not a big deal. So we can delete this face, press Alt Z, you have a face in here, you can delete this face, and now you can select these 2 edges and just press F to fill them. You can do the same thing here. So 3, delete this face and delete this face, then press 2 and fill these 2 faces. Also, in terms of topology, this vertex is separate because it doesn't have a vertex on the other side. I'm gonna show you how to fix it, even though usually I don't really care much about this stuff. I'm just adding a loop cut here on top, and now I can just press the period to zoom in. So if you pick this first and then this second, you can press M and you can say merge at the last one, because I don't want to move the other vertex. The same thing here, pick any of them, press period. So first the one that I want to move, the second is the one that I don't want to move, and press M and at last. Or you can do at first if you want to reverse, just a little bit. Anyway, now let's pick these 2 faces, extrude by something also. Pick these 2 edges and these 2 edges and bevel only by 1. So scroll to add more edges, up or down to add less. Something like this. Now, for this circle, there are different ways to do it. I'm gonna show you the Boolean way, but usually Boolean will mess up the topology a bit. So we can either try to add more geometry here and try to create it, like try to create the circle ourselves. But the Boolean is the fastest way for now. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna press tab, press this face, press Shift S, and cursor to select it. This will move the cursor to this face. So what I'm gonna do next is press Shift A to create a new object, mesh, and create a cylinder. The cylinder is gonna be too big and it needs to be rotated on the Y by 90 degrees. And the radius of the cylinder should be something. Okay, so let's rotate it from here. That's the first time I learned this, that we cannot change the transform before applying the new object. So let's go down in radius to something like this. So this is like 2 centimeters in diameter, I guess. That's a bit too small. Let's do it 2 centimeter radius. That's a bit too big. So this is like 3 centimeter cylinder. I'm gonna put it in here. The Z can be something like 5 centimeters maximum. We don't need more than this. Move it on the X backwards. Yep. Save. Now what we can do is make sure that the origin of this is on the middle of it, because I'm gonna use it to mirror around it. So I'm gonna add a modifier, a mirror modifier. Not on this, sorry, it's on the cylinder. Let's move the 3D cursor out of the way. So Shift S, cursor toward origin. and then I'm gonna pick this one, mirror, pick the generator and pick the y-axis because this is the y-axis. So now we have two of this, then you can apply them. So now it's not just generated procedurally, it's actually mesh that's that's located here. Then I think what I'm gonna do is first, to make this thing cleaner, I'm gonna pick these faces here, press P to separate them. Just I want to make sure it doesn't mess up the whole mesh, because Boolean sometimes do this. Then I'm gonna pick these two, isolate them, and sometimes for Booleans you need to have closed objects that doesn't have openings, so I'm gonna close these faces just for now. Next, I'm gonna save because sometimes Boolean mess things up. Then we're gonna look for Boolean, pick the objects that we wanna use for openings, and now if you hide these, you can see that you have created this. So we can just apply the Boolean. Now if you don't apply the Boolean, you can still Alt H to unhide. So H is to hide, Alt H is to unhide. So if you press G, you can actually move the Boolean around. This is why these objects are still relevant in this file, but if we just apply them, and you can just delete these now. And so P was to separate, but before rejoining stuff, I want to delete this and this. X, delete the face. Then I'm gonna pick first these small parts, and then next I'm gonna pick the generator, and then press Control. It's Control J. So now they are one object. Then I'm gonna press Tab, 1, A to select everything, M to merge. We want to merge these vertices in here because we now have vertices of these two parts. So A, M by distance, and set it to something very small. You can see that we removed here. Maybe it doesn't show on your screen because I have the frame. We merged around 8 vertices now. It goes 4 by 4, 4 by 4. All right. So we've added this detail. Let's add the hinge, and I think I have to stop streaming after adding the hinges. Yeah, so let's finish the hinges and we can continue this later. So the hinge is just these are one object that are mirrored around the door. So if you want, we can actually keep them as one object. So what we can do is we can go to edit mode, Alt Z, grab all of this, Shift D to duplicate, rotate by 180, yep. Then G, just gonna do it visually because I don't want it to be 100% perfect actually. And now, as we press on the period, just want to make sure that, okay, that's fine. Yep. If you add just a quick light, let's say sunlight, and let's make it stronger and rotate it a bit. So this is what we created quickly today. Yeah. In the next video, I think we're gonna finalize the whole thing. It's not that complicated. We're gonna add this pipe with this maybe detail, small hinges in here, like do this kind of random bend in the metal because it adds to the character. Maybe add this piping with this diesel tank. We're gonna see. All right, thank you everybody for joining. I see that we have 2 viewers. I'm happy. Hopefully if next time you have questions, just leave a comment, I can answer them. Thank you very much for stopping by. See you in the next one.